second row, and then we'll move to the first row here.
Okay, Daniyal, how far have themes in your life affected the themes in your work? And in case they have, then have you ever noticed it becoming a focus, or has it been at the sidelines?
My life doesn't really have themes. You know, my life is I mean, nobody's life has a theme.
Actually, when I say themes, I mean the events or situations that you have faced in life, and how far they have affected your work.
Okay. Well, my family would have you know that all of it is completely made up. No, joking. No, you know, obviously when you're writing, there's in some cases where you actually have to sort of blur the outline because it quite closely conforms with your own experience. And there are other cases in which it's completely made up, and you know, that's the spectrum. And at least in my work, and I suspect in everybody's work, that's the way it happens.
Sort of second row, and then we move.
I'm going to ask you something about your characters, because the traditional relationship between the landlord and the people who work on the farm, there's a distance. But the way you get into your characters, was it observation? Was there a thorough study? Were you really that close to them? Because you were close to them. You described them, and the way you describe their thought process, their, you know, everything.
Yep.
Basically, it's detailed. That's not a traditional landlord farm worker relationship.
Yep. Well, remember, you see, I was in a somewhat unique position in that, you know, most people who run farms, they've sort of grown up with it, you know, and they've been there all their lives, and so they have these sort of, you don't have to like study the animal, you know, of the Mueenuddin, because you already know the animal, you know, in sort of just by osmosis into your pores. I was this completely clueless 23-year-old or whatever I was, who showed up at this place and had to figure it out from, you know, scratch, and therefore I had to study these guys quite consciously. And at the time, I mean, I was writing a lot at the time, and there was part of my mind that was always thinking, someday you're going to write about these guys. They're just way too interesting to be let just to wither away on the vine. So there was, I mean, right from the beginning, I think there was a consciousness that, you know, when you see, like that thing I said about, you know, that was, I actually stored that away somewhere in my brain thinking, that is delicious, I have to use that. So what I'm saying is that there was quite because I came from outside, I had to study these guys very closely. Hello?
What's the key to writing a good story?
What is the?
The key to writing a good story.
The key, ooh, that's a hard one. I'm going to let you start with that.
I haven't written a really good story, you have, so you...
What is the key to writing a very good story? There are a number of keys to writing a good story, I suppose. But I think that the one thing you can't write a good story without is good texture. Because if the actual line-by-line stuff is entertaining and sort of funny, and you know, it has to be both funny and profound and all those things, then I think even though the story itself may be kind of weak and pathetic, usually at least the reader will give you quite a bit of credit, just saying, all right, it's fun. So maybe that's it. Maybe the key is you have to entertain, and the way to entertain, and I do think that very deeply, you have to entertain. And the key to entertainment, I think, is generally starts with texture.
Other questions at the back? People at the back, Ahmed Rashid.
Yeah. Daniyal, I was wondering, you know, this explosion in Pakistani young writers like yourself and Kamla, Mohsin, Hanif. Why do you think it's happening now? Do you relate it at all to the political upheaval that the country is facing? Questions of identity, of poverty, of, you know, all the issues that beset us right now. Why do you think this explosion is happening 64 years after partition?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's not forget that, you know, there were these wonderful writers. I mean, thank you. There were these wonderful writers before us, like Saleh Solari and so on. So there, you know, we have, you know, we have our elders. One, two, I think that there's a generation of people because clearly in Urdu and Punjabi and in these other languages there have been many more wonderful writers. It's just that I, for one, don't know about them. But I think that we're a whole generation of people who sort of went abroad, got educated abroad, and and we're literate in a different way. I mean, and I'd love you to talk to this too. Our elders were, we had elders who were very literate, but they weren't comfortable in their skins in the West the way we are, and they didn't have that sort of tactile understanding that we inhabit the stuff we read, the Western literature, because I think those guys always were more outside of it. So there are many responses to that, among which would be that, look, there are only 3 or 4 of us or 5 of us, whatever, and that's hardly a sort of enough to call us, a huge literary movement or anything like that.
I'm going to do what any good Desi girl will do, which is to repeat what my mother said, which was in a session earlier. One thing actually she brought up, which is quite interesting, is that, and she was talking about this really in relation to the poet Marquis Qureshi, and Marquis reading Derek Walcott for the first time and having the sense of, I can, sort of a sense of familiarity. I think if you were growing up, say, in the 50s or 60s in Pakistan, what was your model for the kind of English language novel or short story you could write? I think that's also sort of a part to look at in there, that since sort of certainly post-Midnight's Children, that we don't, I don't think either Daniyal or I or anyone of our generation would think twice about being Pakistanis. Daniyal, of course, is also American, but being Pakistanis, writing about Pakistan in an English language novel or short story, there's nothing odd about it to us. I think if you were a Pakistani writer in the 60s, it would be a bit odd. How would you do it? Of course, Zulfikar Ghaus is here, who was, really, I think the first in post-independent, in Pakistan to really do that. But it was that whole question of how is it done was that first stumbling block, which is just not any kind of issue at all.
That's right, yeah. I think it's easy now to forget, for example, how revolutionary Midnight's Children was. Now on rereading, my opinion of it is changed, but at the time, I was just completely blown away by it, and and you're right. It was the possibility you can do this stuff, and it's, we're very. For us, it's sort of like you have the elder sister and the younger sister, and the elder sister never gets to go anywhere and has to stay home until she's 18 and can't drive the car and so on and so forth. And then the younger sister, very unfairly, is sort of cruising around on her own at 14 because the elder sister has kind of made this space for it. Yeah. So I think we're kind of in that position.
So we're thanking our elder sisters here.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about the journey toward The New Yorker.
Yep.
As stated earlier, it's a huge honor and many congratulations. But how did that come about? Was it through an agent? Did they approach you? What was that journey?
It was weird. I published one story, the one about the Paris story, Our Lady of Paris, in this sort of semi-obscure literary magazine. And absolutely out of the blue, and then it died without a ripple. And I was just so overjoyed to get published at all. I couldn't believe this happened to me. And then suddenly about 2 years later, I got approached by a publisher, and they'd happened to see it somewhere and said, and then through that I got an agent, and then the agent just took over. It's my agent. I don't even hear about it. He just, when the New Yorker acceptances happen, he just calls me up and says, he doesn't tell me he's submitting them, and I don't know what the alchemy is by which he bedazzles whatever the guy's name is.
I think he showed them the stories. I said, I think he showed them the stories, and that was the alchemy. Yes, at the back.
I don't know whether you write for yourself or the audience.
I'm sorry?
Do you write for yourself or for the audience?
Oh, obviously for the audience. I write. I enjoy the process of writing. I love writing, and that when I'm in the act of writing, I feel more alive than I do ever at any other time if it's going well. But ultimately the whole point is that you guys go out and read this stuff, and I get to play and make these lovely little puzzles, or I hope they're lovely, and then you guys get to read them, and I get pleasure out of the thought of you guys reading them, and that's so it's both. But certainly without an audience, the whole thing would be meaningless. Yeah.
Someone here? If other people have questions, just raise your hands now so I can see them, so I can direct people over to you.
In short stories, there's the art of narration is very, very crucial to here. Yeah. in short stories, you do know that, you would obviously know that the art of narration is very crucial, and there's a lot of techniques and tricks that you can work with, and like free and direct discourse or the stream of consciousness technique, all of those things. In Pakistani literature, a lot is taken away with the portrayal of Pakistani culture and the imagery and all of that. How do you compromise in trying to work with short stories about Pakistani culture so that you adequately portray the culture as well as work with narration as a writer?
I'll sort of try to entangle, what you, or to try to give my understanding of what you asked, which is the relationship between the. Could you help me on this? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear properly.
Okay.
Go on.
So there's the narrative.
Right.
This is, you'll tell me if I'm doing this correctly. So there's the art of narration, there's getting the story across, but then I think the question was that if you're writing about Pakistan, there's a lot of Pakistani fiction about local color, I guess would be the phrase for it. Sort of are you saying that you're writing towards an audience that possibly a large part of your audience may not know the world you're writing about?
Yes.
So
I see. Okay,
as a writer, do you feel that you're spending a lot of time
that's really
adding
interesting,
local
actually,
color?
because most of my audience is not in Pakistan but is abroad, and so clearly it's a very different thing when I describe it for you guys and when I describe it for a guy in New York, and so that's really interesting. But you know, I sort of write it at the level where I would understand it myself, and I guess I'm not really conscious of trying to. I mean, you can't explain. First of all, if you're explaining, you're dead. You're dead in that it's not going to succeed. So it has to, but at times you do have to just put in a little touch of something, because otherwise they're not going to understand in the West. So there is some compromise that has to be made to sort of perfect, if it's integrity or whatever you want to call it, in which you don't explain at all.
Do you have a question? No, I mean, Daniyal, you with my neck? No, okay. Any other questions? I think we have time for about 2 more, since we started a little late. Anyone?
Don't all say it at once.
Anyone? There's someone in there.
Come on, there we go.
Okay, in the second row.
You.
Oh, and the lady in the second row.
With the fawn color.
Second row. This one.
Thank you. Do you focus more when writing? Do you focus?
Where are you? I don't have my glasses on. There you are.
When you're writing a short story, do you focus more on technique or on like the general arc of the story? Are you a big picture or a little picture writer? Because does the germ of a story come from like a single sentence or an actual event?
Well, first of all, I mean, you can't think of it as a mechanical process. It's a chemical process. So you know, the story and the arc of the story, all of that is sort of bound together into this sort of, as you're experiencing the writing of it, it's sort of this chemical compound that's sort of, transforming in your mind, and so there's a kind of an organic development. It's organic. But clearly, I mean, certainly for me the process is that there's one little piece and I carry around a piece of paper, and it may be something somebody said, it may be the way a man I've seen looked, or any one of a number of things, and that'll sort of sit in my back of my mind for a long time and sort of start accreting a story around it, and then so that's how it works for me.
Okay. And the second row, the final question.
Yes, hi. Out of the 3 forms that you've written in, poetry, short stories, and novel, which one do you enjoy the most, and why?
Well, I certainly believe that poetry is the highest form. I mean, I believe in a hierarchy. I think that the most elegant and refined form is poetry, and then short stories, and then least of all, the novel.
I'm going to beat him up after this.
I
agree with him, but I'll still beat him up.
The process is so different that you really can't compare. Say, I enjoy this more, I enjoy that more. Writing, they say about poets that poets are people who spend their lives standing around in rainstorms, hoping to get hit by lightning, and that's sort of how writing poetry is. Whereas with prose, you can sort of grind it out. It's like, you put in the meat, and at the other end comes out sausage. And so it's easier to do. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to Daniyal, Mueenuddin. Could we have a round of applause?
Thank you. And thank you, Kamala.